And we're back with a quick tutorial on metal horrors, one of the most horrifying creatures introduced in the Anomaly DLC because of the fact that it's so hard to detect them. Right now we're going to use the dev mode to induce an event. Metal horror implantation, and we'll hit the button and nothing. You will notice that there is no change on the map, there is nothing that affects us. However, using dev mode some more so we can get a better view of what's going on, we're going to show the hidden head diffs that are on all of our pawns, and then we're going to look through all of them, trying to find the culprit. And here we have it, a metal horror implantation. 5 Machine here has had a metal horror implant in them, and it basically retroactively figures out a reason for them to have the implant. There is no real way to prevent metal horrors from spawning in your base. It's basically just one of those map events. However, there is an initial infection that requires certain things to have happened. Basically, it's a new pawn that has arrived in your colony in the last 30 days. If one of your colonists has experienced a revenant hypnosis in the last 30 days, or a melee attack was suffered by a shambler, flesh beast, noctule, or sight stealer in the last 30 days. If any of those things have happened in the last 30 days, then that pawn is eligible to get a metal horror implantation. Do note, that doesn't mean they will definitely get a metal horror, it just means if the storyteller rolls a metal horror, that's one of the infection vectors it can use. However, the problem you face is you won't have dev tools active, you won't know there's a metal horror here. How do you find out? The grey flesh sample that you find lying around your base is the first indication that you have a metal horror infestation. It could be one pawn, it could be multiple ones at this point. You see, the moment the pawn became infected, they could spread this infection to others via means we will cover in a bit, but it usually takes about between 2 to 3 days before they drop the first grey flesh sample, meaning you will not know during that time that there's the potential for infections. First thing you're going to want to do is get one of your colonists with the science ability and get them to analyze the flesh sample. It doesn't seem to matter how good their science is. You will need to find 3 flesh samples and analyze them, and once you do, at that point you will be able to do a surgical inspection for the metal horror. However, that's really a huge problem. It will take anywhere from between 30 days or so before you get the 3rd flesh sample. That is a really long time to be suspicious of all your colonists, and there are many vectors for infection. First, we're going to cover all the vectors for infection that can cause you the biggest problems, and the first one is cooking. If your cook is infected with a metal horror and they cook a meal, note I said meal, it does not seem to affect pemmican at all. I have fed over 6,000 pemmican to my colonists made by a cook infected with metal horrors and nothing happened. As well as that, it can't infect nutrient paste meals. Doesn't matter if it's loaded up by someone infected with a metal horror or not. The only way you can get metal horror infection from a meal is if the meal was cooked by someone infected directly with the metal horror. Odds are roughly 5% that each of the meals cooked by that cook from the time they get the infection will give you metal horror disease or whatever it's called. So the moment the first grey flesh sample is dropped, you will want to pause all cooking. You will want to disable the consumption of all meals that you have available and then either switch over to nutrient paste or pemmican. Switching to nutrient paste will give you a negative mood bonus. Pemmican is a little bit more expensive in terms of food costs, but is generally really easily accessible and gives a use for pemmican. I don't know if pemmican was an oversight that might be patched out. Check the description below, I'll update it if that changes. One very important thing to note. If you discover that your cook is infected with metal horror and they have cooked meals, then you will want to destroy all of those meals. Even if you discover the metal horror and expunge the infection from your colony in its entirety, those meals are still infected and can reinfect your colony with horrors. So you will have to destroy all the meals if the cook turns out to have been infected. However, if you want to farm metal horrors, that's also a good way to get them, but we'll cover more on that later. For now, we want to get on to surgeries. Basically, if someone performs a surgery, each attempt at surgery has a 50% chance of passing on the metal horror infection. So you would want to cancel all the surgeries you have going on. This means extracting hemogen packs, that also counts. Giving someone a blood transfusion also counts. So any of these operations all have to be cancelled. However, you will also have prisoners. You might be using some of those prisoners as a hemogen farm. They can also get infected if the doctor performing the hemogen extraction is infected with a metal horror. It basically limits you on all the medical operation procedures, and for 30 days that is a really big problem. Next up, and very related, is feeding patients. When a patient is down and unable to feed themselves, or they're injured and want to rest, your colonists will come along and feed them meals, assuming they're assigned to medical. That means that if someone has a metal horror and is assigned to medical, they can cram the meal down someone's throat, and there is a 30% chance that every meal they feed them will pass on the metal horror to them as well. We'll cover mitigation strategies on all of these things in a minute, but there is a couple more things we do have to cover. Double beds are an absolute perfect vector for infection. If we just turn on the dev tools, show hidden head diffs, you'll notice that this person does not have metal horror disease. However, the moment we let 5 machine get into the same bed as them, instant implantation. They only have to sleep together for a split second, and the moment it happens, it's done. That's it. The infection has been passed on. However, there is ways around this. One of the things you can do is you can put people in separate beds. If you put people side by side in a bed, if they're a couple, they are fine sleeping side by side in separate beds. It gets rid of the want to sleep with someone buff. But they can't pass the infection. Barracks can't pass the infection. The only way they can pass on the infection is if they're in a double bed. So one way to mitigate this problem, put couples into single beds to make sure that they can't pass it between each other. You will lose the gut-loving bonus because they won't be able to gut-loving in that situation. The final infection vector is unnatural healing. Now, this is an ability that was only introduced in the DLC, and it basically is an ability that allows you to completely 100% heal any injury. People can grow back limbs, all that sort of stuff. You can cure dementia. It's effectively a healer mech serum on a 6-day cooldown. That has the occasional chance of giving wonderful flesh tentacles. However, every use of this, if the person is infected with a metal horror, they have a 100% chance of passing it on to whoever they perform unnatural healing on. A couple of things to note. Tending someone medically does not pass it on. So if someone's injured and you're bandaging up their wounds, that you have 0% chance of passing it on as far as I'm aware. I did a lot of testing on that and I could not find a way to spread the infection. The number one goal when you find that first piece of grey flesh is to stop the spread. So long as it can't get passed on to anyone else, it's actually not a big problem. And it's pretty easy to live with for long periods of time, even if you don't know exactly who has it, just so long as you know who doesn't have it. So, a couple of mitigation strategies that you can employ immediately. 1. Stop all operations, stop all food production, switch exclusively over to pemmican or nutrient-based meals. If you have access to the robots, in the Biotech DLC, High Mech Tech gives you access to 2 beautiful robots, the Fabricator and the Paramedic. The Paramedic can't be infected with metal horrors, and that can take care of all of your medical needs. The Fabricor can actually run a cooker, which means you can use it to cook all your meals and you'll never have to worry about it spreading that way. That effectively 100% removes any risk of infection getting spread, assuming you don't put any of the other colonists to help out on medical or cooking. Don't worry about butchering meat, harvesting crops, or anything like that. None of that can spread metal horror. Another thing you can do is if it's too early or you don't have biotech, you can immediately grab your cook and imprison them. By arresting your cook, you can immediately start to interrogate them. This is incredibly powerful in a lot of ways. First off, interrogation works immediately at finding a metal horror and you don't need the third flesh piece to find it. As well as that, if we let Smirk off in here, they can immediately start the interrogation, assuming... Oh, 1 second, they're sleeping. We can start the interrogation immediately. Now, I've done an extensive amount of testing on this. Oh, that is a wonderful detection right there. Smirk did it immediately. Smirk noticed something wrong with 5 Machine while chatting. They exhibited some combinations of unusual behavior, strange vocal sounds, or barely visible metallic worms in their eyes. Smirk suspects that 5 Machine is infected with a metal horror. And then it explains a bunch of stuff. However, if we go under health effects here, go into DevTools and remove show hidden head diffs, you notice we can still see the metal horror. The metal horror has now been revealed. There is 2 ways this can go, though. 3. 1 would be you get this, where you find out they've got a metal horror without anything bad happening. 2, the metal horror, upon detection, immediately bursts out of the chest of the infected colonists. Or 3, you find nothing. I have determined this is an effective way to screen essential colonists for your colony. Basically, cooks and medics. Everyone else you don't really care about because they're not going to spread it. This also works even if the person doing the interrogation is infected. So if Smirk had a metal horror themselves and they interrogated 5 Machine, they are just as likely to find it even if they're not infected. So this is completely 100%, well, not 100%. Let me show you the numbers. This is just a list of all the testing I did. I did 20 attempts with someone who had 3 in social, and across 20 attempts, there were 7 total detections of the metal horror. 4 of them were violent and 3 of them were safe, as in they saw that the metal horror was there, but there was no reaction from the metal horror. That is quite decent attempts, considering it only required 3 social. I was worried that people with low social colonies would have a hard time detecting them, but with a base of 3 social, this is like easy for anyone to do. Cranking up to 10 social, the detection rate did not really change. However, the amount of safe detections did go up. But honestly, we're only doing 20 detections apiece. You'd have to do 100 at least to get a real feel for it. And if someone wants to do that for all of these, you can go ahead. That just, I have limited amount of time in my day. Next here, we can see that 20 social definitely does have an improvement. It's 30% more successful detections. Only 3 were violent and 7 were safe, meaning half the time they detected. So a very high social is useful, while getting up to 20 social is not that easy. Well, unless you have biotech and some gene packs. It actually gives a reason to have a very high social pawn now. Then we tried it with a 10 social plus a horror, as in we infected the colonist with a metal horror who was going to be doing the interrogation, and we made sure that they had 10 social. With 10 social and a metal horror infection, they still managed to detect it 8 times, which is, about within the margin of error, let's just say. 3 of them were violent and 5 of them were safe, and the hilarious thing was the 3 violent ones, once you detect one metal horror, all the ones of the same strain pop. Meaning the person doing the detecting went, oh, that person has a metal horror. The metal horror burst out of the chest of the person they were detecting on, and the metal horror burst out of the chest of the person doing the detecting. Which, okay, it's funny in a dark way, but it's definitely one of the weird quirks of Rimworld. By accident, though, the first time I ran this test, I got very low numbers. I discovered they had blood loss on the colonist. I had done a Hemogen pack extraction, which reduced the amount of blood in their body, which gave minus 20% to their consciousness. This seemed to drastically affect the results. It reduced their successful detection rate down to 4 instead of the 7 or 8 we were used to. Too violent, too safe. Make sure anyone doing the detecting does not have anything affecting their consciousness. Otherwise, I think it would reduce your chances. But even with this, it took until the 9th attempt before there was one detection. So 9 attempts, that's rough, but there's ways around that. We'll go over that in a minute. Just to test the opposite end of the spectrum, I got a pawn dosed up with Go Juice, 10 social, metal horror, and still, it did not actually improve their detection rates. Still 8 detections total, 4 were violent, 4 were non-violent. Quickly testing this again, what we want to see here is a failure to detect the metal horror. Assuming we fail, all you have to do is this. Grab 5 machine, set it from interrogate to release. Have Smirk release them, please. And then the moment you release them, draft them back up again, have Smirk immediately arrest them, put them back in prison, lock the door behind you, set prisoner to interrogate, and then set Smirk to interrogate them. And then you can keep doing this again and again and again. I would recommend you do at least 10 interrogations. 10 interrogations is almost a 100% guaranteed find. You can do 2 interrogations a day if you don't want to use this sort of, well, this is technically an exploit. Releasing them and putting them back in basically resets the timer, which the game... And this here is what happens when a colonist infected with a metal horror dies. Immediately the metal horror pops out. If there was anyone else infected with metal horrors by this colonist, they would also have all of their metal horrors pop out. And if you check the age of the metal horror, you will determine just how long the metal horror has been in there. As well as that, when it happens, it tells you right here exactly how they got infected with the metal horror. And if they infected anyone else, it'll tell you the vector they used to infect them. This is also one of the reasons how we know that no one gets infected by getting a medical tent or something along those lines. So, to recap, on first flesh drop, disable all food production, switch everyone over to pemmican or nutrient paste, immediately imprison your cook. You will have to deal with the -6 mood penalty though. Once you release them from prison, assuming they don't have a metal horror or assuming you detect the metal horror, once you release them, they will have a -6 mood penalty for 12 days. So maybe make sure their drug scheme is quite generous when it comes to beer, psychite, tea, ambrosia, that sort of stuff. Or you could switch them over to lavish meals. They are the cook, as a lavish meal will give them +12 mood, which should handily counteract any of the negatives they've get from being in prison. Next up, you might then want to cycle through your doctors one at a time to make sure none of the doctors are infected. If none of your doctors are infected, if none of your cooks are infected, then you don't have to care. If any of your colonists have double beds, that could be a problem, but if there's only 1 or 2, then you only have to worry about, 2 colonists being infected. Assuming you have vetted all your cooks and medical staff and you're happy that the infection is not going to spread, you can wait until the 3rd flesh piece drops. This, however, will take about 30 days. That is a bit of a problem. And until you examine that 3rd piece of flesh, surgical inspections will do nothing. We have already examined 2 pieces of flesh, and as you'll notice, nothing. However, if we get Bichette just to go over here and examine this last piece of grey flesh, this will take her 2 seconds, we will get the analysis complete, and it tells us this is a unique biosignature. It's called some random name. Now we can detect them. However, this is unique for every single metal horror infection. For example, After we do a quick surgical inspection here, this can be done by anyone, even with a medical skill of 3. I have tested this with medical skill of 3, medical skill of 8. Makes no difference, 100% success rate across 10 operations. So even with a level 3 medical skill, you have a 100% chance of doing this test successfully and identifying that there's a metal horror in here. Which reminds me, I should probably get these guys over here now. And the moment this medic is done, we will be gifted with a metal horror bursting out. And as you can see, it's an adult and it is 31 days old. 5 Machine has suffered a surgical scar to their brain. Getting a trauma savant from surgical inspections is rare. It can happen, but it is very rare. In fact, surgical inspections are one of the few operations it's almost impossible to fail. Even if the person's blind, doing the operation in the dark while suffering from a massive debuff to their consciousness, as in it's reduced by half because they're going through massive drug withdrawal, or they're stoned off their head, still impossible to fail. This is the first time I've seen a trauma savant happen, though it can happen. It seems about 2% of the operations, 1 or 2%, which is usually a good thing as it improves people's people's manipulation. The one interesting thing about metal horrors, though, is once you've killed them, they have a 50-50 chance of dropping a shard. This one did not, unfortunately, which means farming them is potentially quite profitable. But the main things to take away are you cannot detect via surgery a metal horror until you have examined a third piece of flesh and gotten the analysis complete, all clear. Some people have said it's taken up to 5 pieces of flesh for them to get it. I have not experienced that myself. It's always been the third. Some people have said it's only taken them 2 pieces of flesh to get the analysis complete. I can neither confirm nor deny any of those. In all of my testing, it was 3 pieces. Many people will want to isolate and destroy the metal horror as soon as that first grey flesh sample drops. What is the fastest and most efficient methods to do so? And that is, well, sacrificial prisoners. You shouldn't have to actually kill the prisoners, but it would be good to have about 4 of them to maximize your odds. Now, assuming you don't have any of the other DLCs, the probably cheapest way of doing this would be to go into the prisoners, go into operations, and queue up an anesthetize. So we're going to want to set up an anesthetize bill on all 3 of these. Now, you have to remember, each one of these anesthetize operations has a 50% chance of gifting the person metal horror if the person doing the operation is infected with a metal horror themselves. So having 3 gives us quite decent odds. You want to go into work, disable everyone from doctoring, and then pick 1 person. Let's say we would get them to do doctoring, and we would get them to do wardening. And we would have them come in and anesthetize all of the prisoners. However, since in this instance we know we're going to go straight to 5 Machine. Now, this is going to be expensive. It's going to cost you 3 pieces of medicine for every single colonist you have, and it's not even going to be perfectly accurate, but let me demonstrate. After anesthetizing all 3, 5 Machine has given 1 of them metal horror, and the second one is fine. In some instances, though, your odds will not roll well. But let's assume that you got all of your colonists, they're all the colonists you're concerned about, and you anesthetized all 3 of these. Then the next step would be to wait until they recover from the anesthetic, which might take a little bit of time, but once they've recovered from it, you would then immediately set all of them to be interrogated. Then you'd have to wait about 5 days or so, and you should get you'll then find out whether or not any of them have been infected. If you have Biotech DLC installed, which really seems to pair quite well with the Anomaly DLC, one of the other operations you have access to is Extract Hemogen Pack. This can be done by anyone, requires no medical knowledge at all, and then once you extract a Hemogen Pack, you can then do a blood transfusion, which puts a Hemogen Pack back into them. Meaning you can do 2 operations on all of your prisoners using the 1 colonist. In fact, you can lock them in the room, do 3 operations, then unlock the door and get them to do the remaining 3. Maybe put a storage shelf outside the door with a bunch of blood packs on it so that they can quickly jam the blood all back into them. This has basically a 0 cost to you. You take blood out, you put blood back in, and you keep going until you've done all your colonists. It is very micromanagement intensive. That is the problem. And detected. Existential Tread. Notice something wrong with Janos. Let's wait before we look at Janos. We'll make sure we have show hidden head diffs off. And then when we look at them, we can see metal horror implantation implanted during surgery by 5 Machine. So anesthetizing them, or doing blood transfusions, or if you want, there's lots of other operations you can do on them. Once you've done an operation, about 2 on each one of them, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to have infected them with the metal horror. At which point you can start interrogating them, and then once you've interrogated them, it will tell you who spread the disease to them. And then you can isolate them. Now, let's demonstrate what happens when, you know what, that prisoner is still being set to interrogate, so I wonder what will happen. I've never actually tested, once we've detected the metal horror, if you keep interrogating, will the metal horror pop out? Well, I'll be. The moment you have done a successful interrogation and discovered that there's a metal horror implantation, all you have to do is a surgical inspection. I would point out we are still only on the first piece of flesh here, meaning interrogations are rather powerful. Now you will also notice that 5 Machine, despite not being anywhere nearby, has also been disabled and will be bleeding out in 6 hours. Reason being is, once you trigger one, you trigger all. You'll notice here that 5 Machine implanted through finger spike attack, Genaus implanted during surgery by 5 Machine. This can be awfully uncomfortable when 4 or 5 of your colonists are infected, as the metal horrors that come out are effectively have the same attack strength as a Scyther, while only taking 20% of the damage and being rather tough. I would heavily recommend investing in ghouls. Ghouls are also an option. If you don't have prisoners, you can do surgical inspections on ghouls, or you can do anesthetize. So you can anesthetize ghouls instead of prisoners, and you can use that to basically act as a vector. So you get all your people to anesthetize the same ghoul. However, the problem is you can't interrogate ghouls. This is only good when you've actually got 3 flesh samples to work with. That's why prisoners are the preferred method. So for a bit of fun here, we're going to basically do a bunch of blood transfusions. We've basically ripped the blood out of all of these, and then we've put it all back into them. And now that we've done that, we're going to do it all over again. And why have you stopped? 1 second. By locking them in here, we can greatly speed up how quickly this happens. And then all we do is we stick all the blood back into them. This allows us to do all of the transfusions and... Oh, no, not extract. Put it back in. And once we've done this twice, so that each one of them has had blood extracted and put back into them twice, then we'll do the next part of this plan. I was a little wrong in that it takes 2 blood packs to put the blood back into them, so this is actually -3 blood packs for doing all of these. But once this is all done, we're going to do one last thing. We're going to send 5 Machine on a little bit of a caravan. We're going to test 3 things in quick succession. The first is releasing one of the prisoners. This here is Janosh, one of several clones. Oh, and the moment they get to the edge of the map, metal horror bursts out of their chest. It seems if you have someone who's got a metal horror and you either banish them or kick them off the map or return them to their faction. Doesn't count though if you fire them in transport pods. They don't care if you fire them in transport pods. But if they try and walk off the map to go back to their faction and never come back again, it triggers all the metal horrors that are around the place to all pop out. So you'll notice that, yes, all of our other prisoners in here are now popping out as well. Then we're going to send 5 Machine off the map. We know for 100% certainty that they have a metal horror inside themselves, but we're sending them off on a caravan, and nothing. Game does not care. The game's like, okay, cool, you want to send off that guy, that is fine. However, if we were to, say, grab some of these prisoners now and start doing some interrogations or maybe a few surgical inspections, this should rather... There we go. Metal horrors are emerging. However, 5 Machine, nothing has happened. So, let's grab all of our ghouls right here. And bring them in to say hello. And bring everyone else who's in here out. Yeah, we don't want to mess with the metal horrors just yet. We'll let the ghouls take care of it. Oh! Blake was not infected. Somehow they managed to have 4 operations done on them and they didn't get infected. I'm kind of impressed. These are all juveniles. Yep, there should be at least 5 then. Yeah, there's 5 metal horrors. And you'll notice we got ourselves 2 shards out of that. There's about a 50-50 chance they'll drop shards when you kill these metal horrors, which is a reason you might want to farm them. Anyway, 1 second. We have returned 5 Machine to the map, and what we've done is we've queued up a bunch of blood transfusions on all these prisoners. Now, 5 Machine has still got the metal horror inside them. They weren't on the map when the metal horror was, well, exploded out of everyone's chests. Now, let's see how much they've spread this to everyone else. Nope. 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 And nope. From what I've tested, it is impossible for them now to spread it. They have a metal horror inside them, and we can detect it if we go around and try doing surgery and all that and do interrogations. But they can cook meals, they can do surgeries, they can feed prisoners, they can do all the things that should immediately transfer this to everyone else. Actually, I haven't checked a double bed yet. So, same testing again. We're going to put them both into bed. Philippe does not have metal horror infection and still does not have it. Oh, if you're wondering what all these removed are, is because they have a flesh whip for a right shoulder, they actually count as having missing their entire right arm, which is why you can see all the middle finger, all the missing fingers and arm bones and stuff like that. But yes, it appears if you detect a metal horror when one of the infected people is off the map, when they come back, they are effectively a null metal horror. They can't infect anyone, but they count as having a metal horror on your map. So if we were to say go into dev mode, do instant with map and immediately go metal horror implantation, and let's do that just 2 or 3 more times to be sure. Having applied it 3 times and gone through every single colonist, the only colonist with it is still 5 machine. This means that if you find someone who has a metal horror inside them, preferably someone who doesn't have strong cooking or isn't medically inclined, then send them off the map, find the horrors inside your prisoners or whoever else is there, and then when you bring them back on, you effectively have inoculated yourself against ever getting metal horrors again, assuming you never test them or they never get killed. If they get killed, the metal horror will hop out. There is the other options where if you have multiple metal horrors on your map, as in, just say 5 or 6 of your colonists are infected, or over half of your colony, then there is a chance that the metal horrors will just spontaneously pop out. They don't give a reason, they just say you don't know why, but they've decided to pop out. This usually happens when you have a lot of metal horrors and they've been there for a while. But assuming you can limit it to 1 colonist, you can basically inoculate yourself, which is kind of crazy. Now, one last thing. We have done another run where we got everyone, removed all the metal horrors, including from 5 machine. So right now, this map is entirely clear of metal horrors. There's not a single one left anywhere. None of our colonists have it. None of our people out on caravans have it. Nothing. However, all of these meals were cooked up by 5 machine before they left. So, yep, there we go. Victor B. Savanoff is now infected. The plan would be, okay, we can only see that because we've got head diffs on, but the plan would be for them to consume all of these meals, every single last one of them. And once they've consumed all 30 of them, there is a very high probability that they would have a metal horror infection, which is completely separate and different to the original one, as in the one that 5 machine had originally. Meaning we will still have to go through, they'll have to drop flesh twice more, which will be another 30 days and all that. But assuming you cook up, say, 30 to 60 meals by an infected colonist, then you consume all of them with 1 colonist after the metal horror infection has been completed. You can then get them to reinfect all of your prisoners with metal horrors again, and then you can harvest the metal horrors, getting 50-50 chance of getting shards out of them. Best prisoners to keep would be genies, if you've got the biotech installed, because that will give you dead cam, which means they will never do prison breaks. Extra pain gives them the wimp trait. So every single one of them has the wimp trait, meaning they go down really easily. Meaning the moment the metal horror bursts out of their chest, they're on the ground and they're not going to cause any more trouble. If they don't have the wimp trait, they might still try and stand up and fight afterwards, which will probably get them killed. So wimp trait genes are absolutely brilliant for these guys. Or you could just rip out the genes and give them dead cam and extra pain to whoever you want. Delicate's not really necessary, and that means you will always have a decent crop of prisoners that you can keep infecting. And that's also the way you can do the blood thing. In fact, I discovered you can extract blood from them twice, and then you'll have to put 3 packs back into them, but it's actually more cost efficient. That way you get 3 operations on everyone in one single sitting. Do that a couple of times, and you will have very high percentage odds of infecting all of your prisoners. You will, of course, have wealth issues if you have that many prisoners, but it depends what you're aiming for. But this right here allows you to reinfect. In fact, as far as I can tell, nope, I'm not going back and testing it, I'm running out of time. Even if you do keep one of your colonists off the map and bring them back in, and they are infected with the previous version, this is a new strain when this new colonist will start eating the meals that original colonist cooked. And this new infected colonist cannot reinfect the old one, they're already infected, but they can spread it to everyone else. One last weird quirk I discovered. I was attempting to do different meals. I did fine vegetarian meals and I did fine carnivore meals, and I could not reinfect my colonist with them. I cooked up 60 of each. I had a colonist chew through all of them, and they couldn't get infected with metal horror. So maybe, I don't know if this is a bug or not, there might be a bug where fine vegetarian and fine carnivore meals can't infect you. It can only seem to be fine meals or simple meals. I don't know about lavish, I haven't tested those yet, but you can definitely get it from packaged survival meals. So simple meals, packaged survival meals can definitely infect you, and fine meals. But I'm not sure, and carnivore meals and vegetarian fine meals, I can't seem to get anyone infected with those. Maybe it takes just a higher amount, or maybe the percentage infection is lower. I wouldn't bank on it, but definitely pemmican for now is 100% safe. If anyone has any information on whether or not they can get infected with carnivore fine meals, I'd be interested in knowing the numbers. Or any information I've left out, just stick them in the comments and I'll update the description with any new info. Anyway, that is how you deal with metal horrors. Imprison your cook, interrogate them. Imprison your medics, interrogate them. 10 to 12 interrogations to make sure that they're 100% clean, and it doesn't matter if the people doing the interrogations have actually metal horrors inside them. That has no effect on the odds. That should allow you to ensure that the key people who are going to cause problems if they're infected are not. If you can get your hands on bots, do it. The bots will make your life an awful lot easier and make sure metal horrors are not a problem. And if you keep one of your metal horror infected people off the map when you deal with the infection, it seems to inoculate you against future infections. Also, the person who's infected doesn't seem to be able to transmit it, but I would probably not give it to a cook or doctor just to be 100% safe in case some sort of save, reload, or patch fixes it in the future. Anyway, I'm going to cut this out here. I hope this was at least mildly informative for you, and good luck.